In today's video, we're going to take on the task of reviewing each and every one of the Sony PlayStation studios. We'll discuss each studio, their current projects, and the video games they're developing. For PlayStation or for multi-platform. Because you know that nowadays both Sony and Microsoft have become completely multi-platform. Sony PlayStation still has exclusives, but exclusives my two balls. Because really exclusive means it's only on one system.
That's why they say console exclusive, but...
Yeah, that's fine, right? Okay? Well, we have all kinds of games, actually we have games, we have just a few games. Well, let's go over everything Sony has or what Sony is preparing for the future in today's video. And we're going to start this review with Insomniac games. We know that the studio is currently developing the Wolverine game because this game has already been announced. In fact, you could say it was announced prematurely. It's in development, it wasn't cancelled, it's still moving forward and all that. And also, we know that the title won't come out before 2026, and we know this from Sony's financial reports. So we expect this video game to come out either during the 2026 holidays or maybe in 2027. Insomniac Games said that they will talk more about the game when they feel it's necessary, not before. In theory, Insomniac is also developing Spider-Man 3, which is expected to be released in 2028 or later. In addition to a rumored X-Men video game that would serve to connect the Spider-Man games with the Wolverine game, and that would come out after 2030. And finally, it's rumored that Insomniac Games is developing a new Ratchet & Clank game, which would actually come out in 2030, except for the Wolverine game. The other three I mentioned to you are not confirmed, and the information we have is part of the Insomniac leak from 2 years ago. The problem with this leak is that these titles I mentioned to you could very well have been cancelled later on. I don't think either Spider-Man 3 or new Ratchet & Clank have been cancelled, because they're profitable, well-established Sony franchises. But the X-Men game was tied to a Marvel multiplayer, and to the Spider-Man multiplayer, and all of that. That X-Men game might have been cancelled, which would be a shame since I think we'd love to see one. With Housemarque, things were much simpler, because the creators of Returnal have already announced their next video game, which is called Zaros, and it's also going to be a bullet hell style game. That is one of those where you have to dodge bullets coming from everywhere. Well, this title is supposed to come out next year, 2026 at least. That's the release date for now. Recently, it was also announced that Housemarque was hiring new staff, and even a game designer to develop a new installment of Returnal, that is, Returnal 2. Which is supposedly set to release in 2028. Although this is not officially confirmed and is only based on leaks. The creators of Astrobot, Team Asobi, are currently providing support and creating new levels for Astrobot. In fact, we recently received 4 or 5 new levels. Something like a speed run for us to complete in the game. Well, for now they're supporting Astrobot, and we don't know if they're actually working on something new. The problem with Team Asobi, which is actually a problem you'll see repeated many times on this list, it's that these people were also making games for virtual reality. And you already know that both virtual reality and games as a service stopped being a priority for Sony PlayStation after Jim Ryan left. So, the game that Team Asobi was making, a virtual reality game, ended up being completely cancelled, and now nobody knows what Team Asobi is working on. They're probably just looking at each other, figuring out what the next game will be and planning what's next. Astrobot would be the most logical choice because it's clear that Sony is very interested in continuing to grow the little robot's character. And the thing is, Astrobot was hugely successful and had a lot of representation from Sony at booths and conventions all year long. It's clear that the little robot is important to Sony and they're going to keep releasing games, or at least they're going to want to release one more game. Here, things are also pretty easy because Naughty Dog already announced their next video game, which is a third-person adventure in space, and it's called Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. This video game tells us the story of a hustler who gets stranded on the edge of an alien planet from which apparently she can't escape. Because this planet is like some kind of orbital trap or something like that. They promise that the title will have exploration, action, and that it will be a great evolution for Naughty Dog in every aspect. In addition, it will deal with topics about religion, culture, and faith. We also know from Neil Druckmann himself that Naughty Dog has been developing a new video game for at least 2 years. That it's not The Last of Us, and that it's a new intellectual property, which could be a spin-off of Uncharted. These are just rumors, but it's speculated that Naughty Dog is developing, alongside Intergalactic, a video game based on Nathan Drake's daughter. The confirmation that Naughty Dog is working on more than one game right now is official, and it was said by Neil Druckmann himself. And the confirmation that this extra game is not The Last of Us is also official because Neil Druckmann said so. Whether Nathan's daughter is the protagonist of the next game or not is just speculation. Here the matter is also pretty simple because the next thing from Sucker Punch is Ghost of Yotei, and it was already announced. It releases in October. All details are already known. This video game is not the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, but rather another installment that tells a different story about another character. Sucker Punch's idea is to create an entire Ghost of Saga, telling different stories about different ghosts. It might seem like a similar idea to Assassin's Creed, maybe if in the future they manage to evolve this franchise, and they keep releasing more and more installments about different ghosts. Who knows, maybe one day they'll dare to leave Japan and we'll get a ghost of whatever outside of this world. No other projects from Sucker Punch are known. Although it's speculated that since they released a multiplayer for Ghost of Tsushima, maybe they'll do the same for this one if the game does well. Also, we know that part of the Sucker Punch team is involved in the live-action adaptation of Ghost of Tsushima. Is there a movie coming based on the first video game? And we also know that part of the Sucker Punch team is involved in the anime adaptation of Ghost of Tsushima. The situation with Santa Monica Studios is quite interesting because this is one of those few PlayStation studios that wasn't cutting staff drastically. They didn't lose a significant portion of their workforce, as far as we're aware. Santa Monica employs over 250 people, suggesting they are working on a significant project to justify the headcount. Well, the problem is that we don't know what they're working on. Supposedly, the studio, under the direction of Cory Barlog, is developing a new science fiction intellectual property. And supposedly, they've been developing this new science fiction intellectual property for more than 6 years. And also, several reports support that Santa Monica Studio is developing a new, smaller-scale, Metroidvania-style God of War in parallel. That's something I simply think is a brilliant idea. A side-scrolling God of War. These are just rumors for now. What is true is that Santa Monica has recently been making moves and hiring video game designers, new employees, and other things. It's impressive that such a large studio with numerous staff has avoided the recent trend of massive layoffs. They must have at least 2 or 3 major projects in development that Sony trusts, because otherwise they would have already been cut. Another studio that often goes unnoticed but is important within PlayStation Studios is Firesprite. This studio was mostly known recently for making the virtual reality Horizon Call of the Mountain. And supposedly, these people currently have 2 titles in development. One would be a AAA horror game, and the other would be an online multiplayer. What we know from job postings and things that have been leaked. In reality, Firesprite hasn't officially announced anything despite being assigned to work on a new Twisted Metal installment. Sony later realized that Twisted Metal wasn't generating much interest, as there isn't a significant audience for the game these days. And they cancelled it. They had also assigned them to work on a virtual reality game, but as I mentioned before, virtual reality is no longer a priority. So that was cancelled too. And what about the multiplayer they're working on? The current state and condition are unknown. The studio's fate remains uncertain due to secrecy surrounding the small, little-known company and potential cancellations. If that were true, would they only be developing a single AAA horror game? It could be interesting, a horror game from Sony PlayStation itself? A new intellectual property and something like that? This is especially impressive for a smaller studio, and it could diversify the catalog, but it's currently just speculation. The thing with San Diego Studio is very simple. These people haven't made any other video game besides Major League Baseball by Joe since 2010, so should we assume they're going to keep making Major League Baseball by Joe for the rest of their lives? This is one of those new Sony studios that Jim Ryan ordered to be created to make games as a service. They haven't released any game yet, and we're waiting for their first video game to come out. This is Haven Studios. And this title, or rather this trailer, is the only thing we have from Fire Gang, the new shooter title. Extraction, I don't know. Shooting online multiplayer premium service game. We have no idea what it is. What we do know is that it's definitely not something good. The director of this studio, a person Sony specifically put there to create this video game, has just left the studio. When the first alphas of Fire games were released, meaning as soon as someone outside the studio was able to try the video game, the director left the studio. You see the chronicle of a death foretold. Sony confirmed their ongoing support for Fire Games and Haven Studios, expressing confidence in their product. They just trust, nobody really trusts anyone. Well, speaking of lack of trust, we have Bungie Studio, which is currently working on Marathon, the game they were going to release this September. But since nobody among all those who tried the alphas seems to have given them any positive feedback. These people decided to delay the game. No confirmed date. When is Marathon coming out? When they finish it? When will they finish it? We have no idea. For now, they say that we'll have news by the end of the year. These people are also working on Destiny 2. I guess they're gonna keep releasing content and things for Destiny 2. What is it that feeds them these days? Then, beyond all this, there's nothing else that Bungie is doing. Or anything for us to get excited about, or that we should be looking forward to in the future. Team LFG, this is the name of the most recent Sony PlayStation studio, or one of the most recent ones. A studio that was formed by former Bungie developers in the middle of the shakeup at Bungie that happened last year. These people would be developing a multiplayer online battle arena that actually started development inside Bungie. Then the people from Sony started, a portion of Bungie employees created this new studio, and they put them only on this multiplayer online battle arena about I don't know what. Supposedly it's a fighting game like Super Smash Bros. With multiplayer online battle arena mechanic similar to League of Legends. It's an online game. This is the debut game from a Bungie Division studio, and the game's details are currently unknown. In fact, these scenes I showed you were from a multiplayer online battle arena I found somewhere, because there's not much to show, there's nothing to teach. Bluepoint is very famous for its remastered remakes like Uncharted, the Nathan Drake Collection, Shadow of the Colossus, and Demon's Souls remake. This studio was supposedly working on its first new intellectual property, a God of War live service game. But amidst all the cancellations at the start of this year, the new game from Bluepoint Games, the new God of War from Bluepoint Games, was reportedly cancelled. And currently, Bluepoint doesn't have any active projects, or at least that's what we know. In theory, Guerrilla Games is developing a cooperative multiplayer game set in the Horizon universe, and in theory, this game hasn't been cancelled yet. Yes, a Horizon Online multiplayer was cancelled, but not the one from Guerrilla Games, but the one from NCSoft. A collaboration that Sony PlayStation was doing with a Chinese studio to develop a Chinese-style Horizon game. The Guerrilla Games project hasn't been officially cancelled, so it's assumed to still be in development despite the cancellation of another project. It's speculated that this Guerrilla Games title would be something like a Monster Hunter but set in the Horizon universe. A game that's multiplayer but cooperative, where you go out to hunt monsters and creatures. If you think about it, the Horizon universe is perfect for a Monster Hunter style game, or even a game like Elden Ring, Night Ring, something like that, where you go out on raids to hunt monsters and enemies. It appears Guerrilla Games is working on something similar, and they are also expected to be developing Horizon's third installment. Sony appears to be very interested in Lloyd, similar to their interest in Astro Bot. They keep it very present, right at the center of everything PlayStation, and the first two installments did pretty well. So are they going to keep releasing Horizon games? By the way, we have several confirmations from employees, leaks, and things like that saying that they're working on it. That's right, Horizon 3. Polyphony is currently working on 3 things. They're focusing on 3 areas. The first is supporting Gran Turismo. 7 new cars, events, and things. On the other hand, they're developing artificial intelligence tools like Gran Turismo Sophie. An artificial intelligence that Sony uses in Gran Turismo 7 and that they plan to implement in other projects and so on. Moreover, Gran Turismo 8 is already in development, with an expected release between 2026 and 2028. Gran Turismo 8's development has officially begun, but there's still a long way to go. It's rumored to be released in late 2028. Some speculate Gran Turismo 7 will be released for PlayStation 6, but the current version still has some life left. The creators of Days Gone were also working on a live service game, which was cancelled at the beginning of this year when all live service games were cancelled. Or at least the vast majority. It appears they only had that one live service game and nothing else. There's talk that they might be planning a third-person shooter, an open-world game, and other things, because that would be the most logical thing. Although for now we don't have any confirmation that they're actually working on something. They're likely doing their job, but we don't know the specifics. This studio is led by Jason Blundell, I never knew how to pronounce it. A Call of Duty veteran and creator of the popular Call of Duty Zombies mode, who also led the now defunct studio from the Invasion games, which would close in 2024, while also making a game for Sony. Well, this new studio, called Dark Outlaw, would be a router, but they haven't announced any project yet. And this is also one of the newest studios that Sony has. Surely right now they're getting organized and looking at budgets, projects, and thinking about what to do. The creators of Little Big Planet are also working on a new project, and it's a project that's aiming for 2027 pretty soon. We don't know exactly what it is, but Media Molecule said it's not Little Big Planet. It's actually a new intellectual property. It could be that Media Molecule's new game will be announced soon. They've reportedly been developing this video game for 3 to 4 years already. Nixxec Software is a unique studio that specializes in creating ports rather than developing original video games. So, they don't have any new developments, but rather they port already developed games to PC or other platforms. Nix Software had mentioned that this year they had multiple announcements that still hadn't been made, so we expect more PlayStation games to be ported to PC. Which ones? We have no idea, or maybe, ports. To Switch too, that would be nice, right? I doubt Sony will port their games to Switch, but lately everything's so crazy and unpredictable. We can wait for now, as this happens nearly every year, and I'm quite certain about it. That at the end of the year, they'll announce at the Game Awards some PlayStation port to PC, or maybe right now at Gamescom, Valkyr Entertainment, or however you pronounce it. It's a support studio that provides assistance rather than making games. These individuals specifically supported the artistic design and other aspects of the development of God of War, Ragnarok, as well as Concord. Currently, the studio doesn't seem to be working on anything special or specific, but since it's a support studio, there's not much for us to comment on either. And this studio isn't part of PlayStation, but I have to include it in this list because it's working on 2 PlayStation projects. Hideo Kojima's studio, Kojima Productions, is on the verge of releasing Sony's next major exclusive. Death Stranding 2 is a video game. Originally belonged to Sony, an intellectual property that was Sony's, but then Sony sold it to Kojima. So from Death Stranding 2 onwards, we don't know what's going to happen with Death Stranding. We assume that the third one won't be exclusive to PlayStation, and we assume that the second one will come to all platforms sooner or later. And besides Death Stranding 2, Kojima Productions is making another video game, one that was announced quite some time ago, one that's going to be about espionage and action. And it's speculated that it's going to be some kind of Metal Gear or something like that. The game that Kojima is making exclusively for PlayStation is called Fisint. It's a spy game, it's a stealth game, and it's a game we know absolutely nothing about. Because Kojima hasn't begun developing this game yet. In fact, Hideo said that he will start working fully on this title when he's finished. Death Stranding 2 is already complete, but the game still needs to be released and receive post-launch support and services. So I guess they'll start working on Fisint next year, which will probably end up resulting in Fisint being the first PlayStation 6 exclusive that we have confirmed. Because it's going to come out in 2026 in 6 years, 2032 PlayStation 6. So for Kojima's new project, you'd better be patient. Well, actually, you'd better be patient for everything PlayStation related. Because, as you may have noticed in this list we went over today, a list where I spared all the sarcastic comments. Sony PlayStation has few current games, focusing more on future projects. But if we look at the other side, if we look at Xbox, we'll realize that there's a huge difference in potential. Because while Microsoft focused on buying studios and acquiring properties and so on, Sony's management focused on developing games as a service, which they later cancelled. So, there's a big gap in the number of games they announce each year. It's true that all the Xbox games end up coming to PlayStation anyway, but Sony itself as a company, their own games, truly their own, ones that are about to come out or that we can already get excited about, they have few, whether due to a bad bet, mismanagement, or any other reason. That's the reality. Let me know in the comments if you think I missed any games, if you think I missed any leaks or something like that, and of course write to me. Which Sony games are you most looking forward to? If you enjoy video games, please subscribe to this channel and like the video. It greatly supports our continued growth. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. Check this out. Here I leave you an awesome video you have to watch so you can keep up with the games that are coming out. Looking ahead to this 2025, we'll soon be making more videos like this with games from 2026 and things like that. But go ahead and check these out because why not? They're really great. Check out our daily podcast in the first comment. Thanks for watching. Bye.